Today I have received within the prescribed time a matter of public interest from the Leader of the Opposition in the following terms: that this House condemns the Cook Labor government for its failures in the health portfolio, which has led to the crisis in our hospital system, affecting patients, doctors, nurses and frontline health workers. The matter appears to be in order, and if there are at least 5 members who will stand in support of the matter being discussed, and there are, the matter can now proceed. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I do move that this House condemns the Cook Labor government for its failure in the health portfolio, which has led to the crisis in our hospital system, affecting patients, doctors, nurses and frontline health workers. The Opposition is raising this issue as a matter of public interest because over the past week the people of Western Australia have made it abundantly clear they have grave concerns about the crisis in our hospital system and in our health system. Yet again, Mr Speaker, we've seen a continuation of the theme in the question time which has just finished, a theme of the government from last week, who just arrogantly deflect and distract. They deny the realities that confront them day after day, insisting that we have a world-class health system. But maintain that line, a world-class health system, despite the health professionals pleading with the government, pleading with them to stop using that line. Respectfully, they've said, please don't call our health system world-class. And the frontline workers have been told very different stories about our hospitals literally falling apart. And then we hear this question time performance, the one that we've just finished with. And I was going to say this to the end, but when those opposite look indignantly around at the questions we're being asked and the questions that we are asking them, perhaps they've forgotten these words written on Friday in the daily newspaper. The words were, Mr Speaker, it's hard to imagine a more politically inept, tone-deaf, hopelessly incompetent performance from an apparently experienced state government than what we have seen from the Cook regime over the past week. Very accurate. Now, they're not my words. They are the words of the Editor-in-Chief of the West Australian newspaper. And we've spoken about this before. Perhaps those opposite choose not to read the newspaper. That's fine. That's their prerogative. They can do what they wish. However, we know many people do, and we know that those words are considered. I note in the same editorial space today some kind reflections on the announcement that we saw yesterday. So those opposite wouldn't be able to accuse me of using these words just to suit my argument, because I note kind words that were used today to reflect an apparent change of heart. As the Shadow Treasurer behind me described it, some epiphany that appeared yesterday, an epiphany that out of thin air, out of a week of deflecting and denying, trying to discredit and say there's nothing wrong, there's nothing to see here. It went on for the week. It led to the words, it's hard to imagine a more politically inept, tone-deaf, hopelessly incompetent performance from an apparently experienced state government than we have seen from the Cook regime over the past week. After those words, and a weekend with the Prime Minister here, where it was raised with him, I note, by journos, we note today, we got some clarity, it wasn't the right time for the state government to raise the most urgent need, which we heard about in this chamber last week. You'll recall, Member Farrode, the hospital handball got going early last week, handballing it to the Prime Minister. This problem that we have with aged care beds, it's not our fault. We've had 9 years, but it's not our fault. It's not our fault. It's the Prime Minister's fault. He's our mate, he's on the same team. We really like him, he gets WA, we love saying those things. We'll have all the photos when he comes over, but we won't meet him on the Sunday after the week that's been described as a hopelessly incompetent, tone-deaf performance from an apparently experienced state government. we won't meet him on that Sunday. No, he doesn't get WA. No, now he doesn't get WA. Now when he is asked by journos on Sunday, the Premier says the problem with the aged care beds is your fault. It's your fault, Prime Minister, and the problems in the system, they're your fault. And the Prime Minister, ambushed by this line of questioning, because clearly his mates over here hadn't given him the heads up, ambushed by this, and as the Premier said, the Premier's right. He came for the resources technology showcase, but you know, I don't know. I've seen a few politicians go to one thing and then get asked questions about something else and do more than two things at once. But the Prime Minister ambushed by this. His reply, members on my side, his reply was, we're doing enough. What are they talking about? We're doing enough. That is exactly right. So, opposite us, the Health Minister and the Premier peddled the line that actually what's taking place with aged care beds is not our fault. We're handballing it over to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, perfect timing from the Prime Minister, gets here on Sunday and says, actually, it's not our fault. We're doing enough. So I'll just frame how the week played out and the performances that we've seen in question time. And all of this really, for me, the members on this side, and for the vast majority of the general public who have commented in strong terms about what they've seen from those opposite. It comes down to a number of things, Deputy Speaker. It comes down to leadership, which there has been a distinct absence of. It comes down to humility, which there has been absolutely none of. And it also comes down to responsibility, i.e. putting our hands up and saying, we understand the problems, we're going to fix it. You might recall, remember we were waved away last week? Remember the Premier in a performance, I wasn't here, Deputy Speaker, I wasn't here at the time, but it was a performance, I do remember it, because I remember him shouting at members opposite about it's like a dog returning to their vomit, I think is the phrase he used. I seem to remember that. And I think he screamed indignantly, get on the right side of history. It was a performance like that. And then you know what he did with those couple of comments? A few weeks later he changed his mind. And he said, actually the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act is no good, it's unworkable. He didn't say sorry, but that's what he did. Well, last Tuesday, the Attorney General. Yes, the Attorney General. Last Tuesday we saw a performance from the Premier that lacked leadership, it lacked humility, and it lacked responsibility. Now, I could care less about the whole waving the arms around dancing that was perhaps designed to mock me, like I care. That's fine. That's fine. We've dealt with a lot worse than that. But it wasn't what was directed at me that was the issue, Deputy Speaker. That performance, that pantomime, which lacked leadership, it lacked humility, and it lacked responsibility, was taken in a very, very disappointing way by the very health professionals who had raised genuine concerns. Like the nurse who said, we had mould with actual mushrooms growing out of our ceiling and in the main corridors. Like the daughter who said, my dad was admitted into Charlie's as he had brain cancer, and on one admission a panel of the roof fell on him in the middle of the night on his head. Or like the health worker who said it's hard to sit and watch the government defend these issues and act as if they are nothing. That's who the Premier was disrespecting. That's who the Premier and his team were disrespecting, not me. It was making a mockery of the very genuine concerns that had been raised by the health workers, the doctors, the nurses, the orderlies, the other workers, the patients and their families, which led to real reports about maintenance and repairs that needed to be done, that led to over 1,000 work orders. And we talk about ownership. We note that the Health Infrastructure Minister last week, the opening off the bat Off the bat, instead of going, yeah, maybe we've got a problem here, there's over 1,000 work orders, off the bat it was, oh no, it's 500. Yeah. It's 500. It's not 1,000 or more than 1,000, it's 500. Well, no, it wasn't. It was over 1,000. We heard the Health Minister deflect and deny and push it around in all sorts of areas and echo the comments of the Premier in saying we have got a world-class health system, even though those directly in the field of duty were asking, please don't, please don't. And we had the Premier who last Tuesday in this place said, I think West Australians can have confidence in our healthcare system. This, by the way, was the Premier who started the week. He started the week, and members this side, I suspected the Premier was off his game when asked about the goings-on with prisoners, uttered the famous phrase, I'm not against eating guinea pigs. That is what the Premier of Western Australia said. I'm not against eating guinea pigs. And then went on to some rambling about them being, in some cultures, a delicacy. Shadow Agriculture Minister, are you aware of them being delicacies? Well, certainly not in this part of the world, I wouldn't have thought.
Not in my constituency.
So that was the Premier on Monday. And then the headline on Tuesday, Hospital of Horrors, our corridors of absolute shame. Radioactive fears and sewage spill in ICU, the subheading. Just 2 more of the more than 1,000 calls for help by hospital staff fearful about patient safety. Of course, the Health Infrastructure Minister said, oh no, it's only 500. It was in black and white. The report said it. They were real issues of safety, repairs and maintenance, real work orders that led to those. And we note that soon after that, the attention of the Health Minister, like the Premier, moved to that blame game across to the Prime Minister. And I'll note that only a week or so earlier, I'd taken the time to write a letter to the Premier to say that ambulance ramping, record ambulance ramping, not good. Can we have some attention on it? Can it be addressed? He dismissed that as well. That was a week earlier. Well, he does like to write a letter. He does like to write a letter. And we have here his letter from the weekend of Saturday, Sunday, May 10 and 11. And he wrote a letter to the Prime Minister congratulating the Prime Minister. So this is when they were mates. This is when they were all sweet then. They were all sweet then. This is when he said to him, congratulations on your re-election. Outlined some priorities, goods and services tax. He talked about housing. He talked about skills and jobs, funding for remote communities. Talked about health. He talked about health. Now, clearly, as we've heard for the last week, all the problems with aged care and hospital blockages are the Prime Minister's.
Yeah, it's your fault.
It is the federal government's. We heard it today in question time from the Health Minister. She said, this is a federal issue. So I don't know, Deputy Speaker, if I was writing a letter to the Prime Minister congratulating him on his reappointment and I was highlighting the areas as the Premier of concern for Western Australia and one of the subheadings was health, guess what might be in the letter? Guess what you might write in there? You might say, Prime Minister, we need help with aged care beds. Do you reckon he mentions aged care beds? No. No. And why hasn't he? Because a lack of ownership, a lack of humility, a lack of responsibility, a lack of leadership. Suddenly the population has aged and overnight, suddenly they have aged, suddenly there is not enough health beds in our system. 9 years. 9 years. And they like to shift this around, move it around, pass it around. That's what they like to do. Conveniently, there's not one health minister, there's 4 health ministers. They don't know what they're supposed to answer. They don't know what they're responsible for. The Health Infrastructure Minister probably can't understand what he did to have to be the person that needs to come up and mop up every time something like this happens. And the Health Minister... Well, the Health Minister's just not sure which areas she's supposed to address.
Excuse me, Leader of the Opposition. I just want to interject at the moment because Hansard are trying to capture this wonderful debate that is going on. So you're continuing to interject. It makes it really difficult. And Leader of the Opposition, you are directing your your commentary to me, not to your backbench, so please continue to do so.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So the Premier, when asked all sorts of questions last week in this chamber, said, I think West Australians can have confidence in our healthcare system. They have confidence in our healthcare system. He then said, I'll commit to holding the Leader of the Opposition to account when he puts the fear of God into West Australians simply for accessing healthcare. The Leader of the Opposition should hold his head in shame today. He's told West Australians that they should be scared to go to that hospital. We'll have a look at Hansard and see where that was. I've had a look at Hansard, Deputy Speaker. It doesn't exist. He went on, this man is a risk to patients. He is a risk to patients' lives, said the Premier. He is scaring West Australians because he sees a small gap of political opportunity here. Well, actually, Premier, what I saw was an opportunity to hold a bad government when it comes to the administering of health maintenance and a whole range of issues to account. The very reason that we are in this chamber. It's for the people of Western Australia that we ask those questions. It is for the health workers. It is for the doctors, for the nurses, for the orderlies, for the patients, for their families who have been subjected to these conditions. And again, Acting Speaker, Deputy Speaker, my apologies. Again, Deputy Speaker, I return to those core themes that I raised at the very start. We know that the AMA asked repeatedly for that phrase of world-class to be dropped. Did we see any leadership? Did we see any apology? Did we see any retraction of the first world claim that the Premier had boasted about? As I mentioned, suddenly yesterday, an epiphany and an announcement. I have here the questions that I asked in this chamber a week ago exactly. The very questions that were ridiculed with the dancing pantomime. One of those questions was, will you order an immediate audit of Sir Charles Gardner Hospital to identify what needs to be fixed to ensure patient and staff safety?
Good question.
And another question was, will you commit to provide the funding to fix the issues at Sir Charles Gardner Hospital? And do you know what happened? I got that dancing pantomime. That's how he treated those questions. Yet yesterday, there was the Premier, the Health Minister and the Health Infrastructure Minister announcing more money to fix the very problems that were raised last week and an audit to ensure that everyone is well aware of what is going on. There was no humility. There were no answers or any attempts to direct efforts towards the record ramping. There was the handball on the aged care beds. And members on this side, and in fact members around the chamber, you might remember that the $50 million that was announced yesterday for 3 hospitals, Armidale, for Royal Perth and for Charlie's, the $50 million announced yesterday is $15,000 less than this government has allocated to a rugby team and $167 million less than this government has allocated to the racetrack at Burswood Park. The people of Western Australia know where this government's priorities are. They know how they treated their very serious questions and issues last week. They didn't see leadership, they didn't see humility, they didn't see responsibility, and they didn't get an apology.